Unidentified flying objects are usually dismissed as fantasy, but sightings are often reported by highly credible witnesses. They've even been seen by 2 British bobbies.
Patrol car Delta 9 with PC Roger Willey and PC Clifford Waycott, based at Oakhampton, were out on night duty patrolling the A3072, Hatherley to Holsworthy Road. Precisely 1 minute past 4 o'clock this morning, they sighted an object 400 yards away from them and at treetop level. They reported immediately to Oakhampton Police Station, where further men were brought out.
There was no question whatsoever that this was a figment of the imagination. It was definitely there. It was definitely either manned by some sort of being or remotely controlled. It was definitely being controlled to view our car or...
You had the feeling that it was watching you?
Definitely, yes.
In the United States, the military faced growing criticism from the public and the media for not taking the subject seriously. In 1966, the US Air Force tried to silence its critics by asking the University of Colorado to conduct the most exhaustive scientific study of UFOs ever undertaken. Their aim was to put an end to speculation and clear the air of flying saucers once and for all. Author and UFO expert Timothy Good has closely studied the Air Force report.
If you actually read the scientific study, which is a very, very long book, it's quite clear that a relatively large percentage of the cases investigated by specialists, by scientists in specific disciplines, were unexplainable. I think something like 30% of the 117 cases examined by the Colorado University Commission were unexplainable.
The report satisfied the military establishment, but it didn't stop the sightings. UFOs continued to be seen around the world. No more so than over the small English town of Warminster. During the 60s, it became the UFO capital of the world.
A lot of people reported these strange clatterings on roofs, which, as I say, is often the onset of poltergeist activity. In other situations, it would be looked at in that way. And there were many sightings of people down on outside the towns. People would be sort of walking in the fields, and they'd see someone who would just fade away or disappear, very ghost-like.
A worried town came together at a public meeting.
Firstly, let me thank you all for coming along this evening, and I hope that what will prove a constructive meeting. It is perhaps appropriate if I first give some background information to clarify the aims of this meeting.
I called the meeting because some people said they'd seen things, and in the local paper they'd written a letter, and then some other individuals ridiculed these good people, saying they ought to take more water with the whiskey.
Many of our townspeople have been frightened by unusual sounds. If tonight we can contribute something constructive to the explanation of these phenomena, it might be able to assure these people who have nothing to be alarmed about.
The meeting was riotous. You couldn't get into the town hall. The main street was festooned with people. Personally, I had to have a police escort to get in.
One night back in the summer, it could have been the 11th of August, I heard a sound that was really horrible. What I would have said was a Commodore Garden helicopter sitting only a few feet up above the houses in the town.
At 3:45 in the morning, I was wakened by this dreadful droning sound.
Would like to speak up?
And I went to the bedroom window, and I saw this brilliant object. It was quite low in the sky, and I live up Beacon View that way, and it seemed to be travelling very slowly, and I was petrified. I just couldn't move. I was shaking like a leaf. I just couldn't move, and it was going on for half an hour.
How many people here tonight are afraid of the thing? How many of you?
Was this the thing? It was photographed over Warminster by a local boy, Gordon Faulkner.
From what he told me at the time, he was coming out from his house to take his camera, which was a rather nice one, a Japanese one, that time, much better than the one my daughter had. And he was bringing it down to loan it to her. And he was just coming out of his garden door, and he looked up and saw this thing across the skyline above the houses. And he thought, that's something odd, and he had his camera, so he just snapped it. Didn't really think any more about it, thought, well, it was odd. But when it was developed, of course, that was the photograph that was sort of accepted all the way round.
The event that so terrified the inhabitants of Warminster sparked the imagination of John Spencer, who was then only 11 years old. Now vice president of the British UFO Research Association, he's still intrigued by the Warminster sightings.
In terms of flying saucer pictures, it's about as good as they come, which is to say pretty bad. There's a general rule in flying saucers that the most clear pictures, usually eventually, you can find the strings that hold them up. The real ones do tend to be sort of pretty grainy, pretty blurred. Because by their nature, these things are reported as moving at high speed and often soundless and often surprisingly. So, you know, Gordon's account is pretty well a standard one, and the picture is not surprisingly very blurred. I have to say it's a very limited picture because there's nothing else in the picture at all to give it perspective or size or distance. As, you know, almost every dimension of the thing is a guess.
Armed to the teeth with sophisticated devices, the world's UFO enthusiasts flocked to Warminster. Every night, sky watchers crowded onto the hills, determined to catch a glimpse of an extraterrestrial. A local farmer, Molly Carey, got caught up in the UFO mania. She took pity on the frozen sky watchers, and her home often became an unofficial guest house. Some nights she'd have up to 20 people sleeping on her floor.
20 years ago, wasn't it? People used to come from all over, and it has been said that there could have been one or two aliens came, but that was just what they used to say. But they came from all, and they were all ages, from the very young to the very old, all walks of life.
I remember the UFO flap down in Warminster. Back in late 1964, I think it started, and it went on in through 1965 through 1967. At the height of it, I went down there, and I can remember traipsing around very cold hilltops together with teams of other enthusiasts. I never saw anything other than satellites and aircraft, I have to say, even though others disagreed with me.
What was always interesting with the sky watches is that you could see the sociology of UFOs as well as what was in the sky. You could see different people, and you could stand in a group of people, and in 6 people, 3 of them could see lights in the sky, 2 of them could see nothing whatsoever, and another person could see portholes on a spaceship from Venus. And that was always fascinating, that different people could interpret things so obviously genuinely and passionately, but it taught, I think, all UFO researchers a lot about we have to study people as much as we have to study photographs.
30 years after the famous picture of the thing appeared, John Spencer had a call from a friend of Gordon Faulkner claiming the photo was a fake.
Gordon Faulkner and I did some experiments with little models made out of milk bottle tops and buttons and bits of, I can't remember exactly what they were made of, but they were all small. They were flying them in the air, taking photographs, trying to get a rough idea as to how small it could get. The film being developed by somebody local.
According to Roger, Gordon and he, and others involved, indeed he thought people working here in the Warminster Journal at the time, got together to play a practical joke on the then owner, Charlie Mills. Roger makes the point that, considering the fuss that had been going on in Warminster, he believes that Charlie Mills knew this was a joke, because here it is, it's a tiny little paragraph here, and it's right next to Mrs. May Butterworth advertising for someone to take over the job of counting wildfowl on Shearwater in the winter months. In other words, there's been no fuss made about it, considering the apparent value of this, and considering the extraordinary spread that came in the Daily Mirror when Arthur Shuttleworth took it to the Daily Mirror within the next day or so.
Gordon has always said that it was a genuine photograph, and I've never sort of disbelieved him, because he's a very keen photographer, does a great deal of photography, but I have never doubted him for one moment that he took a genuine photograph of something that was very odd at the time.
If I, or if anyone, can prove that Gordon Faulkner is telling the truth or lying, or that Roger was telling the truth or lying, it won't make any difference to the impact this photograph had. Whether it was milk bottle tops and buttons, or whether it was a genuine UFO, the picture centred attention on Warminster.
Over the years, the case of flying saucers has been dogged by hoaxes. This craft was seen by hundreds of witnesses who were convinced that it was real. In reality, it was just an elaborate April Fool's joke to publicize an airline. However, it showed just how easy it is to fool people into believing that they have had a close encounter. In the 1980s, the UFO story took on a new dimension. Strange crop circles began to appear in Wiltshire, just a few miles from Warminster, the centre of UFO activity 20 years earlier. Even some die-hard skeptics were puzzled. Ufologists looked to the heavens for an extraterrestrial solution. They rushed to circles being formed and hoped to catch a glimpse of what or who was creating them. Seriologist Colin Andrews has been investigating crop circles for more than a decade.
We are looking at extraterrestrial, or indeed simply a level of nature, high nature, we don't understand.
Once again, skywatchers began flocking to the hills.
I believe that the UFO phenomena and the crop circles are totally connected, and it's to reawaken an ancient knowledge that we've forgotten.
Colin Andrews has been collecting and processing crop circle statistics in an attempt to solve the riddle.
This is indeed a mystery. I've worked with at least 50 scientists and engineers on this over the last nearly 10 years, and there's nobody in the world that's anywhere near an answer to account for this. I believe we're looking at some form of intelligence.
In September 1991, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley owned up to creating at least some of the mysterious patterns.
We wanted to make the UFO society think that a UFO had landed, you see. And after a few years, they didn't know whether to believe it or not. And as the years rolled by, we started doing certain patterns. And as you see today, we've got quite complicated in them.
At certain times of your life, you love to take somebody for a ride, don't you? If it's not doing any harm. And I didn't see it doing any harm.
A relationship was originally perceived between UFOs and crop circles. It was thought that the crop circles were UFO landing sites. Only at the very beginning, when the first sighting of the crop circle was found, it was circular, and it was UFO researchers that investigated it. If we believe the claims of Doug and Dave, who say that they actually manufactured crop circles, the first elaborate pattern that they went for was a sort of one major circle in the middle and 4 outriders at the edge. And they said that they deliberately created that in the shape of the lunar module to make it look like something had landed.
The experts weren't so easily fooled.
It's an obvious, I mean, it's absolutely obvious. This here, you see, it's not consistent at all with the genuine phenomenon.
To this day, the crop circle controversy continues. An amateur cameraman captured on film this shiny object flying up from the corn.
Quick.
Could this be an extraterrestrial explanation for the crop circles?
Let it go. Now where's that piece of paper?
It's a bird.
What? A shiny bird?
Where's it gone?
Just there above that tractor.
Oh.
Tractor stopped.
The farmer too reported seeing a silver disc flying overhead. In the late 80s, the ufologists' attention switched to Florida and the town of Gulf Breeze.
Over those dunes, right there. Over the dunes.
In 1987, this small coastal town in America was overtaken by UFO fever. Like Warminster, the UFO sighting put Gulf Breeze firmly on the map. Local property developer Ed Walters took this video in 1993 while walking along the Pensacola shoreline.
Watching it here, kind of solid in the sky right there. That's the tower way back beyond. I don't know what that is. That must be one of those high rises. Oh my God, just hovering right there.
But Ed is best known for taking these spectacular pictures. To many people, they were convincing proof that flying saucers are real. Just a few months later, Ed took this video footage from his back garden. It appears to show 3 similar objects maneuvering behind the trees. And in 1991 in Gulf Breeze, Anne and Bruce Morrison captured these extraordinary images on film.
Just drop something out, Gary. Again. It's still coming down.
Many UFO sightings seem to take place near military installations. Both Warminster and Gulf Breeze are next door to military bases. One of the best documented sightings occurred over this US Air Force base in Suffolk in England in 1980. Guards reported seeing a strange object in the forest. A patrol was sent out. The following extracts are taken from the actual recording made at the time.
Slow down. Where? Right in this position here. Straight ahead in between the tree. What is it? We don't know, sir. Actually, a Chinese word. Yeah, it's a strange, small red light. We're about 150 or 200 yards from the site. Everything else is just deathly calm. There's no doubt about it. There's some type of strange flashing red light ahead. It's yellow. I saw a yellow tinge in it, too. Weird. It appears that he may be moving a little bit this way. It's better than it has been. It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way. It should be sort of straight off. check about 10 degrees directly south, 10 degrees on the horizon. And the ones to the north are moving away from us. Moving out fast. There's one on the right chasing away too. Yeah, we're both heading north. Okay, here he comes from the south. He's coming toward us now. Now we're observing what appears to be a beam coming out of the ground. This is unreal.
The patrol was led by Deputy Base Commander Colonel Charles Holt, who sent an official memo to the Ministry of Defence about the incident. He received no response and no explanation for what they saw has ever been forthcoming. In March 1990, there was perhaps one of the strangest close encounters of all over Belgium. This time, the Belgian Air Force were able to scramble 2 F-16 fighters to intercept the unidentified intruder. Closing on their target, the pilots locked their radar onto the object. Then something astonishing happened. Within a split second, it accelerated from 280 kilometers per hour to over 1,800 and dropped more than 1,000 meters in altitude. The force created by such a maneuver would be 4 times greater than the human body can withstand. Unable to match the speed of the UFO, the 2 F-16s returned to base. But since the 1940s, over 3,500 pilots have reported seeing UFOs. Now retired former BA captain Graham Shepherd can finally talk openly about his UFO experiences.
On the 22nd of March 1967, we were returning from Gibraltar to London. Quite suddenly, we were aware that ahead of us was a star which was at least twice as bright as the best of Sirius or Venus. All the while it was changing colour. It was very, very bright, iridescent colours. There were greens and blues, beautiful reds. And suddenly, everything happens. It started aerobating. It was moving around the sky, doing figures of 8. It was doing loops. It was manoeuvring at a rate which is impossible, in my view, for known aerodynamic laws. And we asked Bordeaux Radar if they had any unidentified traffic, and they did confirm that they had unidentified traffic 10 miles to the west of us.
Authority, Victor 139, thank you.
Pilots, better than anybody else, know there's often a rational explanation for the strange phenomena they see in the skies.
You see a number of things from the flight deck. Other aeroplanes, you see reflections from the ground. This is day and night time. Cloud formations, the effects of sunlight on cloud, ice crystals. At higher levels, it's quite common to see satellites. The visibility is excellent. It's a very wide angle of view laterally and vertically. We run a very objective, continuous check, if you like, of things that appear outside the aeroplane. And in doing so for thousands and thousands of hours, one builds up quite a bank of experience.
Graham's second sighting was even more dramatic.
We were on a routine daylight flight back from Scotland to London Heathrow in a Vanguard, cruising at about 24,000 feet. We just transferred from the Scottish controller to the Preston radar controller, made our normal routine radio calls, and within minutes, the Preston radar controller alerted us. He told us we have opposite direction traffic in the airway, very fast moving, unknown. Immediately, of course, we looked out of the flight deck straight ahead of us to the 12 o'clock position, and into view came a disc-shaped craft. It was shaped like a discus, shining in the sun. A more accurate description would be like a hubcap of an American car. A cupola on the top, diameter about 30 feet, in my view. I was looking down on the craft, the machine, as it came past, flying at very, very high speed. It came to within about a quarter of a mile of us. I was looking down on it, some 200 to 300 feet below us. There are two very curious things. First of all, there was no shockwave from this machine. It was close enough, in my experience, it was close enough to give us quite a bump, a noise and a bang as the shockwave passed us. Secondly, we made no attempt to report an air mist, a near collision, or file an air safety report. So that not only us as a crew, but the Preston radar controller were aware that its strangeness didn't qualify it for an air miss or air safety report. 25 years on, I feel I've got a long and happy career behind me. And I feel so strongly that the whole subject is, and should be, in the public domain. So I broke ranks, if you like. I broke ranks and decided to talk about it openly to the media. And British Airways were apoplectic. That's the only word I can use. They gave me lengthy interviews, and they followed up the interviews with a letter which, in all fairness, does describe the conflict that does exist between a subject, UFOs, which is on the fringe of believability, and the credibility of British Airways captains. British Airways want the least possible controversy. They don't want wacky captains. They don't want wacky crews. They don't want any of the air crew involved with any subjects which have the slightest possibility of compromise.
Conspiracy theories have been around since modern UFO sightings began, but new explanations may be somewhat closer to home. Mankind is only a fledgling traveler in space, but in just 30 years we've already landed men on the moon and sent probes to other planets. Are we really the only people out there? A number of astronauts in both the former Soviet Union and the United States are rumored to have encountered UFOs.
Armstrong is reported to have seen a UFO, or two UFOs, on the moon, together with Buzz Aldrin. And a number of people from NASA have come forward with that story, including Maurice Chatelain, who was a communications specialist who helped design the Apollo spacecraft. He confirms that both Armstrong and Aldrin did indeed see UFOs on the moon. I'm not a conspiracy freak as such, but the fact of the matter is that there is an officially acknowledged cover-up of the UFO phenomenon, certainly by the United States authorities. This is easily provable because since the 1970s, thousands of documents on UFOs have now been released by the intelligence community. I'm talking not just about the FBI and the CIA, with which we're all familiar, but the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, the State Department Bureau of Research, the Atomic Energy Commission, Army, Air Force, Naval Intelligence, and several others, all of whom, with the exception of the Air Force, denied any serious involvement in UFOs and denied having any documents. But thanks to the Freedom of Information Act, we know they've been lying. The object that I saw in the sky here in southeast London in 1980 first appeared as a bright point of light, just like Venus or a very bright star. And at first I thought maybe this was an aircraft reflecting the last rays of the sun, because this was at about 7 minutes past 4 in the afternoon. But then I realized that it wasn't really in the right position for Venus or any other planet. It was much too bright to be a star. Somebody got videotape of it from the Sevenoaks area, and this is, I think, a 35 to 40-minute video. And that clearly shows a point of light in the sky. Unfortunately, you know, without a powerful zoom, you don't get any idea of the shape of it.
I mean, that could not be a weather balloon. That's impossible. Because it wouldn't move up and down like that.
What? Going up and then going over, reappearing, and it's sort of going in a sort of circle, wouldn't it?
40 other people reported sighting a similar object.
Subsequently, I made a lot of inquiries about this object. And I tried the London Weather Centre. They said they'd had no reports of unusual activities. I contacted Civil Aviation Authority at Heathrow. They said that no airliners coming into or leaving Heathrow had reported sighting the object. Ministry of Defence confirmed all that and said that there had been no radar tracks of unknown objects at the time in question. Now, that's quite possible, of course, especially if the UFO was able to disguise itself or to screen itself in some way from radar. But I am surprised that some pilots, at least, didn't report it, because it would have been seen from a very, very wide area. And I'm sure that thousands of people must have seen this thing. I mean, it was alternately hovering and maneuvering in a completely clear sky for 1 hour and 10 minutes.
Some of the clearest and most frequent sightings in modern times have happened in Elmwood, Wisconsin. They had so many close encounters that the town became the inspiration for Steven Spielberg's famous film.
When the sun goes down over Elmwood, Wisconsin, the people of this tiny town see them.
I could see the little legs on it, like little pods on the bottom. It was a saucer-shaped deal.
When it got over the village, and it was gone out of sight.
Almost everyone in this community of over 900 people have either seen a UFO or know a relative who has.
People call it the Forbidden Village in the Forsaken Valley.
But Elmwood decided to go one step further in making contact.
In our opinion, this is going to represent man's grand attempt here to reach out and establish a relationship with this society.
They're trying to raise $16 million to build a landing base and entice the aliens out of their spacecraft. But there are many people who already claim to have met aliens.
I was here in this room, in our bedroom, and it was 3:17 a.m., early hours of the morning. I was here alone. My husband had gone away on a training course. I was sleeping on that side of the bed, and my young son was sleeping on this side. He was a lot smaller then. And I was woken up. It was just a strange feeling, really. It was like unseen hands sort of shaking you awake. And I had this urge to get out of bed and go and look out the window. It was like someone was telling me to go and look out the window. Just very strange. I did. I got out of the bed and I walked over to those windows and looked out. In the distance, there were lots of little lights moving around. And I thought at first that they were just stars, you know, moving around in the distance. I remember thinking, you know, wow, they look pretty, and then realising that stars don't do that. I felt myself sort of being lifted up, being pulled upwards. And I was in this light, lots of blue-white light. And then the light dimmed down, and I could see sort of shadows moving around in this light. And then the light sort of dimmed down a bit more, and then there, standing in front of me, were what I would describe as 3 non-human beings. They were about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, brown, tan in colour, and had large oval heads, large oval black eyes, had long skinny arms. They looked like undeveloped children. They moved up and stood in front of me, and one of them stood directly ahead and one on either side. And they had a funny smell to them. I think the most traumatic part really was this taller one had come and stood by my head, and he wasn't holding me, but I felt like he was holding me down. He was leaning across the head of this table and staring into my face. And I couldn't move. It was like all I could do was respond to him looking at me. And one of the other little brown guys came over from the right, and he was holding something that looked like a single strand of fibre optic cable. And it was lit up all along its length. It didn't have a light on it or anything. It was just a light. And the one standing at the head of the table took my head and sort of turned it slightly facing that way. And then I just felt this most tremendous pain. Like my head was being sort of split open on the inside. It was just a tremendous pain. And I knew that whatever this was, that this one was carrying, that they'd stuck it into my head. And I felt a sharp pull at the back of my head, like a tug, a sudden tug. And I was laying on, as I say, laying on this table, and I can remember I'm crying, and the tears are running down my nose and sort of dropping onto my lip, and I can taste them. I can taste the salty tears, you know, and it's not the sort of thing, those aren't the things that happen in dreams. Those are the things that happen for real.
Psychologist Dr. Susan Blackmore has a special interest in the paranormal and has been studying accounts of alien abductions.
I've spent a lot of my research life studying out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, strange phenomena of dreams and so on, and I'm really interested in these altered states of consciousness and visions that people have. And I suddenly started to notice comparisons, equivalences between those experiences that I know a lot about and UFO abductions that I didn't know much about. In both, people see bright lights, get sucked down dark tunnels, have strange noises. They often happen at night or in the dark or in states of deep relaxation. People see strange beings and who seem to communicate by telepathy, wonderful new worlds. There's a lot of similarities, and I thought maybe what I know about the brain and these experiences might help us to understand alien abductions as well. The classic alien in many abduction experiences, particularly in the States, is about 4 foot high, pale grey, has a very large head with big, black, slanty, deep, liquid black eyes, a very thin, spindly neck, hardly any shoulders really, little thin arms. It looks almost as though the body couldn't support this huge head. It doesn't speak, it has hardly any mouth. It communicates by some sort of telepathic power. Now, there are lots of other types of aliens, but that is the most common. What I think's happening is that lots of people have odd experiences, but you will build the details around what you know, and the idea of the greys and so on will get bigger and more common the more it spreads through our culture with television programs, and that's what I'm looking at. Brighter, and the noise louder, and then right in front of her appeared the strangest looking being she'd ever seen. It was looking...
Dr. Blackmore is visiting schools to find out what children think visitors from another planet would look like.
One of the things I'm trying to do is to see whether, if you relax people and get them into a nice relaxed state, tell them a story about an abduction and ask them what was the alien like, we should be able to find out what they might imagine if they had one of these odd experiences. Are you frightened of these aliens, or are they quite friendly? I think it's very much worth studying abduction experiences scientifically, not because I think we're going to find, you know, who the aliens are and what they're trying to do, but because it teaches us something about our mind. I think there are several things that are going on in the brain when these experiences happen, and I wouldn't claim to have got a complete explanation here. Now, when you're dreaming, your body has to be paralyzed, otherwise you would enact your dreams. So there's a mechanism to paralyze all the body muscles. It can sometimes go wrong, so that you kind of are awake and conscious and aware, but your body's still paralyzed. Now, you can imagine that's pretty frightening. If you try and struggle against it, you feel as though you can't breathe, you think there's monsters, whatever you were dreaming about is coming to get you, and you're helpless, but you can see your room.
No, I mean, I have experienced vivid dreams like, you know, everyone else, and they remain with you for a while. In fact, they're extremely vivid. But I have never, ever woken up from such a dream or a nightmare with hair missing from the back of my head, a small hole in my navel that was leaking fluid, all the bruises where this, you know, pencil thing had touched me, and this overwhelming sort of memory of smells and sounds. You know, these are real, as I say, sort of this is real sensory input here, and you just don't get that in dreams. You know, this was real. Whatever level of reality it was definitely real.
In the 1960s, NASA established the search for extraterrestrial intelligence using huge dishes to scan the airwaves. But despite a few close calls, they're still waiting to hear that first vital message from the stars. The nearest star to our solar system is 40,000 light years away. Even if we had the technology to get there, none of us would survive the journey. If aliens are so hard to find, perhaps a more earthly explanation exists for the UFO phenomenon.
The more I looked into the flying saucer, alien spacecraft approach to UFOs or ufology, the less satisfactory it became, increasingly so. People had written things and said things that when you really studied them, went back and investigated them, simply didn't hold water. I was intrigued to find some other approach, and in the midst of all that, I remembered an experience that had happened to me in 1967, just shortly after my Warminster days, when I'd seen a rectangle of light in the sky, and about a dozen, 2 dozen other people had seen it also with me. Very curious phenomenon. And whatever it was, I knew it wasn't a spacecraft. It looked like it belonged in the Old Testament or something. And it had a very powerful effect on me. And I recall that, and I thought, well, what could have caused that phenomenon? I still don't know. But my line of research over the last 20, 30 years has been to follow this idea of Earth lights or light phenomena, not coming from outer space, but produced by the Earth itself. Well, if these things were being born out of the Earth itself, the first thing to look at, obviously, logically, was the geology, the actual physical structure of the Earth. What could it be about the physical structure of the Earth? I guess fault lines, geological faults, strains and stresses where huge amounts of electrical energy are generated. And there's definitely a geological component. There's geological faulting. There'll be seismic activity. Low level, we're not talking about big earthquakes. We know lights occur before and during and after earthquake. They're called earthquake lights. These earth lights are clearly somehow related to them, but one of their big differences is that they can last for a long while, half an hour, over an hour in some cases. Earthquake lights, ball lightning, they're very transient phenomena.
This object was seen in Ottawa in Canada in 1991 and recorded by an unknown cameraman. And this object still remains a mystery. As the camera moves closer, we see again what looks like the classic outline of a flying saucer.
I believe UFOs have been going on, if they are natural energies, they've been going on as long as the Earth's been going on. I think it's part of the natural environment of the Earth. They got a name for themselves in 1947 when Kenneth Arnold saw some in Washington State, USA, and he used this phrase that they were moving like a saucer would if you skipped it across water, and the newspaper reporter then picked that up and used the term flying saucer. I've described that term, flying saucer, as the best advertising slogan in the world because people are still buying the product 40 years later, even though they don't know what they're buying.
I'm convinced that there is a very fine line between fear of ridicule and official secrecy. And I'm sure that one of the reasons the authorities are loath to get involved in any public discussion of the phenomena is because they're afraid of looking stupid.
For something to be interesting in science, it needs to feed into what you know already and teach you something. So that if we could learn something about the way they move or the energy they use or something that would feed into the science we have already and teach us something, then we'd all be out there studying the movements. But they move about in random, incomprehensible ways and behave far more like mental phenomena than physical phenomena. And I think that's another good reason not for taking it too seriously. I could be proved wrong when they zap down out of the sky, but until then, I'm more interested in what's happening in here than out there.
In 1977, NASA launched the Voyager space probes on a mission to travel into infinity, deep space. On board, they carry a message from the human race. In years to come, they too could become mysterious UFOs circling above some far distant planet. How will its inhabitants react to the idea that aliens have been exploring their world, investigating them?
Ruimteschepen die op aarde neerdalen en mensen die worden gekidnapt door vreemde wezens. Visitors from Space, na de onderbreking.